Hitler, you probably didn't even hate the Jews. That was just the meth making you crazy, dog.
All of you, get back in the closet. You deserve a ass whooping. All of you, get back in the closet.
How
Go
much does it
yourself.
cost for fascism? How much do the taxpayers have to pay for a fascist country?
They're evil. They are activists doing evil. So treat them like the evil that they are.
The time to start is now, right? The time to plant a tree is 10 years ago, and the second best time is now. Strikes are the most effective way to stop profits, get demands, and force policy changes. If you can shut down profit, you can make any politician do anything.
It's time to stop pretending otherwise. It's time to be ruthless, and time to afford them the same amount of grace that they give to their Palestinian victims, because they are only going to get more and more ruthless with their victims if you don't.
What's up, what's up? Welcome to the stream. Holy shit, we've got a day. We'll start with headlines and then go into more specific stories.
When Trump called.
Oh, my fault, I had the desktop audio muted.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Israeli forces have killed 8 Palestinians across Gaza in the past 24 hours, according to Gaza's health ministry. At least 118 Palestinians have been killed in Israeli attacks on Gaza since Friday, when Trump called on Israel to halt its strikes. This is Ibrahim Deeb, a displaced Palestinian from Jabalia.
When will we start speaking the language of the Israelis? The only language that they understand.
A genocide, a humanitarian extermination. We are suffering during this current war from poverty, famine, displacement, and all types of things that disgust human beings. You look at people now, those alive are just like those dead, just because of war.
Meanwhile, Israel's far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir prayed at the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in Jerusalem today. Hamas condemned Ben-Gvir's visit as deliberately provocative.
We are 2 years after the terrible massacre here on the Temple Mount, where there is victory. Every house in Gaza has a picture of the Temple Mount. And today, 2 years later, we are winning on the Temple Mount. We are the owners of the Temple Mount.
Trump's special Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff and Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner are attending the Gaza ceasefire talks in Egypt today. Hamas and Israel
Genocidal freaks, dude.
are holding indirect negotiations based on President Trump's proposed 20-point plan. Qatar's Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdurrahman Al Thani and Turkey's intelligence chief Ibrahim Kalin are also set to attend the talks. A senior Hamas official told Reuters Hamas negotiators in Israel have exchanged lists of prisoners and hostages who would be released if a ceasefire deal is reached. Here's Qatar's foreign ministry spokesperson Majid Al Ansari.
Now it's early to talk about any alternatives to any plan. We're talking about implementing this plan, Trump's plan, and applying this plan. All parties have agreed to this plan, so there are no obstacles now in terms of agreeing to the 20 points contained in President Trump's plan. The obstacles now are in implementation.
Israeli forces intercepted another Gaza-bound humanitarian aid flotilla Tuesday. The Freedom Flotilla Coalition and 1,000 Madlenes to Gaza are operating a new fleet of 11 vessels with 150 people on board, including doctors, and initially
Francesca Albanese said, send 1,000 ships. She called for every port in the Mediterranean. Why is that so hard? Is there not 1,000 ships available? Are there not 1,000 available in the Mediterranean? Do they think they know better than Francesca Albanese? Do they think that any less than 100 ships is even worth it? Challenging the siege is not enough anymore. I'm sorry, it's not enough anymore. You're just endangering your crew at that point. You're just sailing into Israeli custody at that point. Get more organized before you jump too soon.
Police said 3 boats were attacked 120 nautical miles off the coast of Gaza. Soon after, all boats were intercepted by Israel. In a statement, the group said, quote, sources so far indicate the unarmed crew aboard, including doctors, journalists, and elected officials, have been abducted, as well as the vital aid worth over $110,000 in medicines, respiratory equipment, and nutritional supplies that were destined for Gaza's starving hospitals. Their whereabouts remain.
Just because you don't respect your enemy, it doesn't mean that you don't take the intel for what. You're just putting yourself in harm's way for no reason in an attempt to symbolically break the siege. It's just not enough. It's so much to do. In reality, so little. The Palestinians can't wait for you to get your shit together. They carved Sumud into the sand in the beaches of Gaza. If you're going to deliver hope, you need a bigger boat. You need 100 more boats. Hope cannot be brought on a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen vessels. It's not enough. You might as well be sending one. You need a certain amount of momentum to break out of the orbit of the Israeli Navy. I guess they thought because Spain and Italy scattered frigates that they thought that maybe they'd have safe passage all the way to Gaza, but they were abandoned and intercepted. So if I can be as charitable as possible to the Sumud flotilla, they had more ships when they started, and with just 41 they managed to get one really close, within like Palestinian fishing waters almost. So that's my thought. My thoughts on the flotilla. Why I took a break from streaming afterwards, because it was truly demoralizing in a way that I had not experienced before. Because on one hand they could have made history, and on the other hand instead it was just the same old story. Piracy in broad daylight.
Unknown, they said. The U.S. government shutdown has entered its 8th day. A draft memo is reportedly circulating in the White House stating hundreds of thousands of workers who've been furloughed due to the government shutdown may not automatically receive their back pay once the government reopens. The memo reportedly states Congress must approve new funding for the workers to get paid. Speaking to reporters yesterday, President Trump again threatened to use the shutdown to implement mass firings and cut public programs.
You know, one of the things that we have is some advantage, you could say, but because of the shutdown, which I think they made a big mistake.
Look at him talking about withholding funds to government workers while there's a bunch of fucking gold behind him. If you voted for him, doesn't that not, like, sit weirdly with you?
We're able to take out
that groceries have gone up exponentially, and Trump is in here with a bunch of gold, trimming every single inch of the fucking Oval Office.
billions and billions of dollars of waste, fraud, and abuse, and they've
How rich is that? Waste, fraud, and abuse. And he's sitting in front of a bunch of fucking gold, bro. Oh, that was not there before.
handed it, on a silver platter. And Russell Vogt, he's a serious person, very serious person, and he's sitting there and he's getting ready to cut things.
Meanwhile, the federal...
He was offered a silver platter, which, to me is not enough. It ought to be a gold platter.
Federal Aviation Administration warned of staffing shortages at airports in Nashville,
Great.
Boston, Dallas, Chicago, Philadelphia, and air traffic control centers in Atlanta, Houston, and the Dallas-Fort Worth area. At Burbank area in California Airport, the air traffic control tower went unmanned for hours. Union leaders for air traffic controllers and airport security screeners said the situation will worsen as the shutdown drags on.
And you know there were probably planes in the air during those hours.
Hundreds of National Guard troops from Texas have arrived in Chicago as President Trump escalates his crackdown. Trump has labeled Chicago a war zone, referring to the growing protests in opposition to his mass immigration raid. Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson this week signed an executive order banning ICE agents from using city-owned property, such as parking lots, as staging grounds for agency raids. The American Civil Liberties Union is accusing the Trump administration of intentionally subjecting immigrants to inhumane conditions at the notorious Louisiana prison known as Angola, a former slave plantation that's recently been used to incarcerate immigrants and asylum seekers. A lawsuit filed by the ACLU.
Bro. How ominous is that? A former slave plantation turned into a modern mass incarceration concentration camp. Jesus Christ. This is what American concentration camps look like. Right here. You have no rights, apparently, because you are labeled as an illegal person.
Monday argues detainees are being punished for crimes for a second time in violation of the Double Jeopardy Clause because the government failed to
Kristi Noem deserves to be in The Hague.
Deport them within 6 months of a removal order. In their petition, ACLU lawyers write, quote, the anti-immigrant campaign under the guise of
fucking fascist time Barbie over here.
Making America safe again does not remotely outweigh or justify indefinite detention in America's bloodiest prison without any of the rights afforded to criminal defendants, unquote. An investigation by Wired magazines revealed ICE is bolstering its social media surveillance nationwide. Federal records show ICE is looking to hire more contractors in the state of Vermont to expand its so-called National Criminal Analysis and Targeting Center, located inside a largely unmarked property in Williston. The surveillance center is similar to another ICE facility in Santa Ana, California. Contractors will reportedly have the ability to collect personal data from Facebook, Instagram, and X of immigrants.
Why Vermont, though? Because of the low population and but good infrastructure, I guess?
It's targeted by ICE, as well as their family members, co-workers, and other associates. Earlier this year, ICE signed a multi-million-dollar contract with the controversial surveillance tech giant Palantir to track and deport immigrants. That agreement was an extension of a contract with Palantir first signed by the Biden administration. Attorney General Pam Bondi testified in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee Tuesday, sparring with Democrats who accused her of doing President Trump's bidding and weaponizing the Justice Department to go after his opponents. She was also questioned on National Guard deployments and the Epstein files.
Something else. There's been public reporting that Jeffrey Epstein showed people photos of President Trump with half-naked young women. Do you know if the FBI found those photographs in their search of Jeffrey Epstein's safe or premises or otherwise? Have you seen any such thing?
You know, Senator Whitehouse, you sit here and make salacious remarks, once again trying to...
If the answer is no, it should be an easy no, right?
slander President Trump left and right when you're the one who was taking money from one of Epstein's closest confidants, I believe. I could be wrong, correct me, Reid Hoffman.
You gotta come with receipts if you're gonna be dropping those kinds of accusations, Miss Bondi.
Who was with Jeffrey Epstein on multiple occasions, and the senator sitting...
Trump is literally in photographs with Epstein. What the fuck are you talking about?
right next to you, tried to block the flight logs from being
You've been blocking the fucking files from coming out.
released. Yeah, you're grilling me on President Trump and some photograph with Epstein? Come on.
Former FBI Director James...
Dude, it's... all these Trump goons all try to emulate him, and they do it just badly. But even when they're doing it well, sometimes they're emulating not the best sides of Trump. I mean, like when Trump is trying to like feign disgust at the Epstein files. Like, are we still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? Like, that's what it's giving. It's giving, are we still talking about this?
Photograph with Epstein? Come on.
Former FBI Director James Comey is set to appear...
That's your response to a yes or no question? What about you taking money? Come on. Unbelievable.
A federal court to be arraigned today is facing 2 criminal charges, which include making a false statement to Congress and the obstruction of a congressional proceeding. Comey will be booked and fingerprinted at the federal courthouse in Alexandria, Virginia. Comes as an FBI agent was reportedly suspended after he refused to organize a perp walk of Comey into the courthouse before the media. The U.S. Supreme Court seemed poised in favor of removing Colorado's ban on LGBTQ+ conversion therapy for minors during oral arguments Tuesday. The challenge to Colorado's ban was brought forward by a Christian...
Tried to do a perp walk like they did with Luigi Mangione, I bet.
Licensed counselor Kaylee Charles, who argued the ban is a violation of her First Amendment rights to free speech and religion. Meanwhile, Colorado Solicitor General Shannon Stevenson argued Colorado's law regulates conduct, not speech. Here's Stevenson in court yesterday.
People have been trying to do conversion therapy for 100 years with no record of success. There is no study, despite the fact that people tried to advance this practice, that has ever shown that it has any chance of being efficacious.
Kind of like the efficacy of Alcoholics Anonymous, which, yeah, there are testimonies that it has helped people, but you don't get testimonies from people who relapse. There's no way to quantify how many people it hasn't helped in comparison to how many it has helped. It's just there's no good way to quantify that data for AA. And yet it is still recommended by court systems and, you know, public funding for something that is essentially an endorsement of the Christian Bible. That's what the big book endorses, the Christian God as their higher power. Anyway.
Politico reports the Trump administration's considering options to privatize some $1.6 trillion in federal student loan debt. Officials with the Education Department and Treasury Department have reportedly been looking for private buyers to sell off a massive portion of the federal government's student loan debt portfolio, currently owed by an estimated 45 million people in the United States. The move would raise legal concerns and could further erode protections for borrowers as advocates continue to demand student loan cancellation. California Governor Gavin Newsom has signed a law aimed at combating anti-Semitism in schools, a move many educators have warned could lead to censorship and the targeting of pro-Palestine voices. Legislation will create an Office of Civil Rights that will provide training to school staff to identify what they believe is anti-Semitism. In a statement to the Associated Press, Teresa Montano with the California Faculty Association said, quote, teacher discourse on Palestine or the genocide in Gaza will be police misrepresented and reported to the anti-Semitism coordinator, unquote. Johnson & Johnson has been ordered to pay $966 million.
The History being written by the victors has already commenced.
Close to $1 billion, to the family of a California woman who died of mesothelioma.
Like, the writing of history books and the policing of teaching on Palestine is one of the benefits of colonialism. The erasure of the indigenous and the replacement with a colonial narrative. It's not a new concept.
A Los Angeles jury found Johnson & Johnson liable for the 2021 death of May Moore. She developed the rare cancer after years of using the company's talcum-based baby powder, which was contaminated with asbestos, a known carcinogen. This is the latest lawsuit amidst mounting litigation against Johnson & Johnson, and comes just months after a federal judge rejected the company's attempt to settle all current and future lawsuits involving its baby powder by filing for bankruptcy. And Missouri's Attorney General subpoenaed Planned Parenthood in an effort to obtain medical and other confidential records of abortion patients. Planned Parenthood Great Plains, Planned Parenthood Great Rivers, and the ACLU of Missouri have said in response, quote, politicians have no place in the exam room with patients and their medical providers, and that's why we'll keep fighting for patients and their rights, unquote. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. Thanks.
Fucking crazy, dude.
That it's fair for everyone, and that all cameras can get their pictures. Thank you. Right. Thanks, everyone. As the Global Sumut Flotilla and the Global Movement to Gaza, as a ground team from South Africa, which was made up of a number of different solidarity organizations and trade unions, we welcome the media today for this press conference, but mostly we are welcoming our comrades who are part of the Global Sumut Flotilla, which was intercepted, we know, in international waters illegally. But today we want to hear from our comrades. I know they are tired. There are 6 comrades that were part of the flotilla. There are also 3 additional comrades with us here who were meant to join, but for circumstances of space on the boats, they returned and hopefully will join the next flotilla. And just to give you an update, that the Freedom Flotilla that sailed yesterday was intercepted this morning at 4:30. So another 180 people have been illegally detained about 120 nautical miles from the Gaza coast this morning. But the flotillas will keep sailing. I'm going to hand over to Comrade Manga Mandela to present to us just a quick report, and then I will manage the questions from the photographers. You'll identify your organization, your institution that you work, and give your name, and then you'll ask your question. Thank you. Comrade Mandela.
Thank you, Comrade. Let me say good morning to everyone that is here to receive us as fellow South Africans. I have with our delegation Zukiswa, with Raiz and Zahira, Fatima and Kerry, who were part of the Global Sumut Flotilla. But I think today it is about the thousands of ordinary women and men that have served this cause. We want to first and foremost acknowledge those ordinary women and men that made this Global Sumut Flotilla possible. They always operate in the shadows and are never known and recognized. We want as a collective to thank you for having come together and ensured that we were able to see this mission through. Let me also acknowledge our donors.
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free!
Palestine! Free, free Palestine!
Free, free!
Palestine! Amandla!
Awetu!
Amandla!
Awetu!
Amandla!
Awetu!
Gaza, Gaza, don't you cry!
We will never let you cry!
We will never let you die!
We will never let you die!
Gaza, Gaza, don't you cry!
Gaza, Gaza, don't you cry!
We will never let you die!
We will never let you die!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free
Palestine! Free, free, free Palestine! Free, free, free Palestine!
Many of us have no resources to see this work through. Yet, with the support of our donors, we were able, as South Africa, to have a boat to carry us to the mission. I therefore want to thank the donors who have supported us and made sure that we were able to be part of this mission. Their names always remain in the shadows and they never get acknowledged. In April 2024, we were stuck in Istanbul with the Freedom Flotilla and we were never able to sail. With their determination, their support, we were able to put together the Global March to Gaza, where we mobilized 4,000 activists from 80 different countries. We flew to Cairo, those that managed to get to Cairo, many of whom were even denied the opportunity to even access Cairo. Egyptian Air cancelled the flight here in OR Tambo, preventing many of our comrades from going to participate. Those that eventually made it were first denied entry at Cairo airport, but many of us could.
Some were snatched from cafes in broad daylight. Like, one of them was a doctor who was disappeared from his hotel room.
Only get to the second checkpoint. Therefore, we failed to get to the Rafah border crossing and get the much needed humanitarian aid. But what is worth noting about that particular mission is that this is what Egypt and the Egyptian government has been saying it's supporting and calling. They called for an immediate ceasefire and the opening of the Rafah border to allow humanitarian aid to flow freely into Gaza. Yet when we came to support their position...
Yeah. So Shahid Bolson, fuck you. It is on Egypt. For being hypocrites.
They denied us the opportunity to get there. So we failed to realize the mission by land. Once again, the Freedom Flotilla, the Global March to Gaza, and the Global Sumud Convoy came together to put this mission together. The Global Sumud Flotilla was born from a need of each country to mobilize boats so we can have thousands of boats sailing to Gaza. We took that upon ourselves on returning to South Africa with ordinary men and women crisscrossing the country, going to every single solidarity group in South Africa, from the Palestinian Solidarity Association to the South African PDS Coalition to Africa for Palestine to the South African Jewish Voice for Palestine. Every solidarity group wanted to come together and have a boat sail in their name. Due to limited resources, we couldn't realize that. We also tried to club by metros, Cape Town, Durban, and Johannesburg. Still, we couldn't realize that.
I guess they were planning on having more vessels. There's just not enough eyes, I guess, on the efforts.
With the assistance of our donors, we were able to procure a boat for 115,000 euros, which was a boat we bought through our comrades in Tunisia from Monastir, and we had it taken to Tunisia. But why was it important for us as South Africans to be part of this mission? It is worth noting that we are a country born out of resistance. From the first settler colonialist that landed in the Cape in 1510, led by Francois Almeida, with the resistance of the Khoi and the San people. They were totally eliminated as we refused settler colonialists on our land. But what is also important for South Africans to note,
South African activists and their comrades truly stand on the shoulders of giants. Like, holy shit. And imagine being Nelson Mandela's son. Like, holy moly.
is that
And then imagine being Nelson Mandela's son and then feeling like you failed. You know? It must be a very emotional time for him right now.
the 1884 Berlin Conference robbed us of our land and enforced borders upon our continent for the beneficiary of 7 colonial states, that being...
I mean, he knows that there are undeniable successes that came from the flotilla, but... And I'm sure everyone's telling him that they didn't fail. But I'm sure in the back of his mind, he wanted more. He wanted more for the flotilla, like we all did. And I'm sure he thinks that people who are telling themselves that are, you know, hugging the marginal successes close to the chest as and praising them as larger victories than they are. It's just probably just not comforting to him. How can you... I mean, even after torture and all that, how can you still rest? When the torture for Palestinians is daily and has not stopped even during these like ceasefire negotiations.
Belgium, Germany, UK, Spain, Portugal,
Which the negotiations are over, by the way. We're waiting on action.
and Italy, France included. We are a country, just as Palestinians are being forced with an Israeli identity. We were forced to embrace a South African identity, which was posed by Westminster. We sent a delegation in September 1909, led by President Dr. Walter Benson Khubusana of the South African Native Congress, accompanied by Dr. Abdurrahman of APO. This delegation went to London in September 1909, rejected Westminster from establishing a union government of South Africa. They were never successful in their defense of indigenous South Africans. We, as this collective, acknowledge that past and that history. We left from the southern tip of Africa and went to the northern tip of Africa in Tunisia, because just like our founding father of our nascent democracy and our global icon went to Tunisia on the 27th of February 1962, because he knew very well, in order to effectively fight the apartheid regime, we needed to build solidarity with the international community. And therefore it was important for us as Africans to sail from an African point. And we are proud to have been joined by Somalia, Senegal, Morocco, Algeria, as well as Tunisia. A global Sumut flotilla sailed on the 31st of August out of Barcelona. My comrade and brother Tiago wanted me to sail with the Brazilians, but our donors called on me to go with our fellow South Africans, and as a patriot, I could not deny that. And therefore, coming to Tunisia and being warmly received by the Tunisians, it showed a spirit of Ubuntu, and that Africa was united and speaking with one voice in support of the Palestinian struggle. But we had no doubts because we know that President Ben Ali, on his visit to our shores, was given an honor by our government for his role in supporting the refugees that were in Beirut in 1982 and gave them homes in Tunisia. So the welcoming of the Global Sumut Flotilla when it arrived in Tunisia, with all delegates coming there, can never be underscored. We were not meant to dock
Wow,
in
that's
Tunisia,
beautiful, actually.
but it was a temporary stop to gather with our comrades. But there were 30,000 participants that registered for this mission. And we had a few boats. With the boats that we had, which were totaling about 70 boats at the time, we found out that many of the boats that were being procured, particularly from our Turkish delegation, were fishermen boats and were not worthy for the mission, and therefore had to scale down in numbers. The boat that we had bought as South Africa, which was Florida, could take 10 passengers with 4 crew members. And we were certain that as a delegation of 10, we would all be able to sail. But with the realization of the challenges we were facing, we had to downscale. So some of our comrades had to take a position to be from the land support. And I want to thank you, comrades.
Yeah, during that time when a lot of the ships were coalescing in the Mediterranean, kind of before they passed the threshold of Italy and Cyprus, in Tunisia and around near Turkey, they were gathering boats, but also spending almost more time in port than they did sailing towards Gaza. They were like sailing around each other and sailing around ports, being docked outside of ports, because they were trying to gather more ships. And I saw the numbers of vessels in the list fluctuating greatly during that time. So it's good to have kind of a recap from just the raw data that we were getting.
For having been bold and say it was important for
This
us
is
to
providing
see
a
the
lot
mission
of context.
It was not about us as individuals, but it was about the Palestinians in Gaza. So Faisal, Jared, and Ilem, who's in Morocco, we will, on Nurain, who fell sick when we were there in Tunisia, we will forever be indebted to you as this collective. Because, and Ishad, we as a collective on our journey continued to draw strength from you. We relied on every information that you fed us from home to be able to communicate South Africa's position. What we embarked on, we knew that it was not going to be easy. And therefore, while we were in Tunisia, we found ourselves victims to the attacks of the apartheid Israel regime. The family boat.
Dude, hang on a second. Just imagine you've been sailing on a boat, trying to organize an activist flotilla across multiple countries. Something like you would need like a NASA control room, ideally, to do, and you are intercepted, tortured, released, and when you tell your story to the media, you get one press conference. I mean, I'm sure there will be others, but this is like one of the first, and detailing the whole journey right after is a choice, but it's a brave choice. And he'll probably speak about this more tactfully in later interviews and stuff, but this is the most raw version of it that you're ever going to get, of him telling his story, his journey, of what he probably views ultimately as a symbolic win, but a tactile, material failure.
Boat, as well as Alma, were bombed on a sovereign state, that being Tunisia. But this was anticipated because we know very well that apartheid Israel has acted with impunity, attacking sovereign states, Lebanon, Iran, Syria, Yemen, of recent Doha in Qatar, and we were no exception. Israeli forces continue to attack and kill as they wish. But we were able to extinguish the fires and come to the realization that we needed to set sail with utmost urgency. And therefore, we left with the 18 boats that had managed to come from Barcelona. There were 21 in total, of which 3 of them were damaged in the attempt of trying to get to Tunisia. We were also joined by the 18 boats out of Tunisia, and we set sail to Greece. In Crete, we were joined by another 6 boats and 10 from the Italian flotilla. Comrades, if there's anything that we can be proud of and applaud, is that as we called in the Freedom Flotilla in Istanbul that we want to see a wave of boats sailing to Gaza, the Global Sumut Flotilla has on record become the largest ever flotilla ever witnessed. But what is also worth taking note is that a humanitarian mission was supported by the Italian Navy and the Spanish Navy, even though when we crossed the yellow zone, they withdrew their ships. We were also accompanied by the Turkish drones that were hovering above us and feeding us information on a daily basis as we sailed closer and closer to Gaza. We thank the Turkish government, the Turkish people, and the NGOs, particularly TICA and the, Red Crescent, that through the naval boats, they brought humanitarian aid onto the Alma boat. As we remained on the waters of...
So it seems like the true selfie yachts were the military frigates that were there just for show. It's the flotilla that stood 10 toes down and didn't cower in the face of Israel. But the Spanish military and the Italian military cowered in fear. As they obeyed their orders to withdraw protection for civilian ships. If you received that order and you followed it, fuck you. As a soldier, you have a duty to protect the unarmed, the innocent. But no, you did your photo op to serve your colonial masters. Good job. Hope the paycheck was worth it. Hope you can sleep at night.
Of Greece, the Greek government provided security and brought their naval ship with 2 coastal guard boats that were protecting us. But the family boat was sabotaged, and this was our command center where Tiago, Rima, and other comrades of ours were as the steering committee. We had to onboard them onto our boat as Alma, which I was on, with Greta, Yasmin, and other members. But with us, 2 comrades, Zukiswa and Riaz, remained on our South African boat, Florida, which was named Anas Sheris, as well as Zahira and Fatima were on Amsterdam, with Zahira later being deployed to another boat. Kerry was on Wahoo as well. So we set sail, focusing on fulfilling our mission. I want to be clear on this, comrades, that ours was a humanitarian mission. It was a non-violent mission that sought to break the blockade and end the siege that has been ongoing for 18 years, enabling humanitarian aid to get to our brothers and sisters in Gaza. We anticipated two scenarios: that we will be successful in our mission and get to Gaza, or we will be intercepted by apartheid Israel. As we now know, we were intercepted on international waters, which is a violation of international law, maritime law, and a violation of our human rights. 47 of our boats were intercepted. We were detained by apartheid Israel Navy and taken to Ashdod, many of whom were denied food as we sailed to Ashdod. On our arrival in Ashdod, we came to the realization that there will never be justice on stolen land. And we were harshly dealt with by the brutal Israeli regime. And many of you by now have seen our comrade and sister, a young woman, Greta, at the age of 22, was harassed by the Israeli regime. We were handcuffed with cable ties, tied tightly behind our backs, taken off our boats, and put on the platform, paraded for all the Israelis and the allies in Europe and the West and the global community to see. And in the midst of all of that, the Israelis sent their best at us. Ben-Gvir came whilst I was still on the Alma boat with an MP from France, Emma, and Ibrahim, and one other comrade from Morocco, and a delegation of Libyans. And he insisted he wanted to come and address us, particularly because I was on the boat. But the irony of this is that what you would regard as the second in command in Israel was rejected by an ordinary captain in the police and told, no, you can't address individuals, move. And he was ushered to the side and denied that opportunity because he wanted to dehumanize us. But as our heads were shoved down and with our hands tied on our backs, we were pushed down and taken onto the platform to join our other comrades. In his desperate attempt, he still wanted to walk side by side with me so I can be captured on video. This is the desperation of a collapsing entity. On arriving on the platform,
Hell
we
yeah,
realized
dude.
that many of our comrades,
It's pathetic.
almost just under 500 of them, had been sitting there. And Greta, who was the first, had been put on the corner, and I was made to sit in the same line at the end with the rest of our comrades deployed everywhere else. I think Zugiswa, as well as Raiz, were put in the front from where I could see. Zahira came and sat in front of me on the last end. And in their best attempt, Ben Kuvira came in the front and wanted to give an intellectual speech. And he came saying, you support baby killers, you terrorists. And I froze in disbelief. This was the best Israel could send, and he had nothing to say. And in our unity, we all started shouting, free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine! Free.
Ben-Gvir and Netanyahu are the type of evil where, like, if you saw a group of people torturing them to death, you'd probably just shut the doors slowly and walk away. Oh, man. It's like, that's how would you like if Ben Kavir was like on his knees with his hands with a zip tie behind his back, and some Palestinian teenagers are like trading punches to the face on him, taking turns hitting him, and his like glasses are broken and crooked, would you be like, hey guys, stop? Or would you be like, this is none of my business? I'd say it's none of my business.
Free Palestine! We are not baby killers, you are the baby killers! And he had no response. Comrades, a people united can never be defeated. That was illustrated in Ashdod. And we say,
alright. Definitely check that out on your own time. I'm gonna move on to this.
During recess, and then congratulated itself for its commitment to law and order.
Speak of the devil, and he shall appear in Persons 3, featuring 2 of them here. The third being, oh, who's that one guy with the beard? You know what I'm talking about.
But that's where Israel is
The one who likes to pose with maps.
now. A country where the far right breaks the law just to prove it still owns it. In an incident that's gone grossly underreported, while the Knesset was closed during
His name is Israel, or something.
recess, 4 MKs used that time to quietly advance a bill to advance the death penalty, execute Palestinians, and then call it democracy. The only person who objected to it was thrown out of the room for mentioning Israel's own hostages and what this might mean for them. So much for that being the very reason for committing genocide in Gaza in the first place, eh? The self-proclaimed only democracy in the Middle East just discovered that laws are easier to break when you're the one who makes them. And the rest of the world, apparently too polite to notice, is still pretending nothing has happened. Right, so this incident took place about a week ago now, 28th of September, whilst the Israeli Knesset was still officially in recess. But this is still very much an ongoing matter, and still very few in the media are actually talking about it, and I find it incredible that they're not, quite frankly. 5 members of Israel's National Security Committee, one of the most far-right committees in Israel's history, over half of the representatives on it either belong to Bezalel Smotrich's religious Zionism party or Itamar Ben-Gvir's Jewish Power, gathered in a side room and did something they were not permitted to do. They held a vote. 4 of them raised their hands in favour of a bill to impose the death penalty on Palestinians convicted of killing Israelis. 1 voted against. He shouted, "Shame on you, there are hostages," and was, as a consequence, physically removed from the room. That brief exchange tells the story of a state that has stopped treating legality as a boundary and started using it to do whatever the hell it likes. The Knesset's own legal advisor had already issued a written warning that any vote during recess would be null and void, but it made no difference. The far right that dominates the committee, that has got Benjamin Netanyahu by the comb over, held the vote anyway, recorded the result, and issued a press release celebrating it as progress. The 4 votes in favour came from Zvi Sukkot of religious Zionism, Limor Sonhar Melech, and Yitzhak Kreuzer of Otzma Yehudit, and Boaz Bismuth of Likud. The absent members, Zvika Fogel is a retired general and a close ally of Itamar Ben-Gvir, and he stayed away to allow some veneer, some pretense of procedural distance. Gilad Kariv of the Democrats, the only member of the committee not part of Netanyahu's coalition, was the one who got thrown out. The optics of democracy being thrown out of the room fitting all too well. The vote's illegality was clear, though. The House Committee had not authorised legislative work during recess. Required consultations with the Justice Ministry and security agencies had not taken place, but the rulebook was never the point. This was a deliberate act of defiance, a demonstration that the far right holds the levers of power and no longer feels obliged to pretend otherwise, to pretend restraint. The death penalty bill did not have to pass that day to succeed. Its purpose was to test the system's limits, to see whether anyone would stop them, and no one did. The text the committee advanced is pretty blunt too. It mandates death for anyone convicted of killing an Israeli out of hostility towards the state of Israel or the Jewish people. Judges would have no discretion. The president would have no power to commute. There would be no appeal for mercy. It would be a mandatory death sentence. Israel
arrived home yesterday. There are still 28 held hostage by Israel, following a violation of all international rights, including the act of kidnapping people in international waters. Among the 28, there are some comrades whom we are waiting for with anguish, but also with admiration. In particular, there is Simeon Ballet, a brother in the struggle, who, precisely because of who he is and how he is, has been on our minds, at least mine, all day long. But the aim of the flotilla was not to relieve us with the return of the activists. The aim they set themselves from the beginning, and they have said so on numerous occasions, was to break the blockade of humanitarian aid imposed by Israel on Gaza and force the world to look at and denounce the genocide. Have they succeeded? Boy, have they succeeded. In these times of media-driven societies, of genocide broadcast live and direct, of social networks that socialize all kinds of information, the media and social networks are the main spaces for political dispute. The global Sumu flotilla has managed to break the media siege, and that is a fundamental victory for the steps we must take from now on. For almost 2 years, we have seen the media talk to us about war instead of genocide, about conflict instead of occupation, about the right to self-defense instead of recognizing the right of the Palestinian people to self-defense after decades of suffering illegal harassment and occupation by Israel. These same media outlets that were incapable of assuming a position of real defense of human rights without distancing the oppressor Israel from the oppressed, the Palestinian people, today fill hours of television, radio, and editorials with demands to stop the genocide, to end the massacre, to guarantee compliance with international law, and to stop Netanyahu. What happened to the right to self-defense? It never was, it never existed, because there is no right to defense that justifies an ethical cleansing. What happened to media equidistance? It never had a place. It was necessary to position ourselves from the beginning with the victims and the hesitations. What happened to calling it a war? Even those who maintain this discourse in the media outlets in the right-wing ecosystem, are aware that it is not effective because people talk about what they see, genocide. We wonder then, what has happened? Why have some media outlets changed their line? There is a feedback loop between two spaces. Yes, the streets force governments and the media to act, but at the same time, the media are what builds social sentiment that is then endorsed in the streets. It is like the chicken and the egg, but with one difference. The media carries more weight. How many times have we seen massive mobilizations that never appear in the media? Let us remember the demonstrations for public health in Madrid. Tens of thousands of people filled Tocha. But then, where did those who had not mobilized see them? The media is key to translating these demands into political movements. Some people this morning said that it is wonderful that the Spanish people have awakened. The Spanish people have been mobilizing almost weekly, an average of 3 mobilizations per month for the last 11 months, and they have always been demanding the same thing. The breaking off of diplomatic and commercial relations with Israel, a comprehensive arms embargo, and a boycott of Israel. None of these 3 points have been met today. None. And yet, they have had to move, take a position, or even make a very bad impression by lying by saying that there is an arms embargo or, worse still, that Spain is the government that has done the most for Palestine, when even in recognizing the Palestinian state they were unable to navigate the waters of the state they recognized, demonstrating why the recognition of the Palestinian state was not a step forward for Spain, but rather a gesture aimed at anesthetizing social mobilization, electoralism, and headlines. However, there is something different this time.
Exactly. Electoralism and headlines. That's all that protection was. It's just a political show.
And that is that the genocide is not only brutal, but we are witnessing it live and in person, and that forces the media, which would prefer to continue showing you only the images of the UN General Assembly or the official statements from Moncloa saying that we are doing a lot, have been forced to tighten the screws because people are tightening the screws on the media. But it has had to do with something else. It is not just the streets that are moving. As we said, it is the media that builds social sentiment and defines the terms of the debate. Social networks have been key to seeing what was happening, but the independent media, those who from the very beginning denounced the genocide by calling it by its name, but also the government's lies, journalists like Olga Rodriguez, who have not stopped pointing out the government's hypocrisy when it says that Israel is doing very badly, but at the same time it is the one who buys the most weapons from Israel in the European Union. The media that have given a voice to those who denounce the passage of boats carrying their military minister bound for Israel through Spanish territory. The media that have not limited themselves to reproducing the government's arguments, because we understand that in times of genocide one cannot be lenient with those who have the power to do something, have been key.
Walker. I'll be joined later by Ash Sarkar. Coming up tonight, Donald Trump has urged a fast Gaza deal. There's some talk that he's potentially going a bit harder on Netanyahu than in the past. I'll speak to a former Israeli negotiator about whether or not that should be taken too seriously. Also, if you thought British politics was chaotic, look over at France. Their prime minister has resigned after less than a month, and they've had 3 prime ministers since last year. Greta Thunberg has been deported from Israel. We'll give you an update on that story. And we're also going to talk about Shabana Mahmood, having discussed banning regular protests because you're only allowed to protest a certain number of times, apparently. Also, Trump's goon squads are, they're often going viral on my Twitter. They tend to look quite unpleasant. I'm talking about ICE, of course. It turns out the UK right want to copy them. So this was an announcement at the Tory party conference. They want to bring about a UK ICE to deport 150,000 illegal migrants every year. I suppose the silver lining here is there's no way that they're getting back into power anytime soon, but worth talking about anyway because it's very similar to the plans of Reform, who are more likely to form a future government. Stay tuned for all of that and more. And if you'd like to support our work, you can sign up at environmedia.com/support. It's almost 2 years since Hamas's October the 7th attacks, and almost 2 years since Israel began its genocidal war against the people of Gaza. Now, in that time, we've heard about multiple plans for a ceasefire in Gaza. And on Friday night, there were signs this time could be different. So in a surprisingly blunt statement, Donald Trump said this: "Based on the statement just issued by Hamas, I believe they are ready for a lasting peace. Israel must immediately stop the bombing of Gaza so that we can get the hostages out safely and quickly. Right now, it's far too dangerous to do that. We are already in discussions on details to be worked out. This is not about Gaza alone. This is about long-sought peace in the Middle East." Now, an American president publicly calling for Israel to stop the bombing is unusual, and he was responding to a statement from Hamas with that group's response to a 20-point plan put forward by Trump last week to bring about peace in the Middle East, or so he says. That plan involved the immediate release of all Israeli hostages in exchange for Palestinian detainees, and it required Hamas to decommission its weapons. Most controversially, it also required Gaza to be governed for a period by an international board chaired by Donald Trump, of course involving Tony Blair. The more difficult part of the 20-point plan for Netanyahu was that it stated that it would, quote, pave the way for Palestinian self-determination and statehood. So what was Hamas's response, and the response that Trump so enthusiastically welcomed on Friday night? Well, these are some of the key parts from their response to the 20-point plan. So Hamas said, after thorough study, the movement has made its decision and conveyed the following response to the mediators. Hamas appreciates the Arab, Islamic and international efforts, as well as the efforts of US President Donald Trump, calling for an end to the war on the Gaza Strip, the exchange of prisoners, the immediate entry of aid, the rejection of the occupation of the Strip, and the rejection of the displacement of our Palestinian people from it. Within this framework, and in a manner that achieves an end to the war and a full withdrawal from the Strip, the movement announces its approval of releasing all occupation prisoners, both living and remained, according to the exchange formula contained in President Trump's proposal, with the necessary field conditions for implementing the exchange. In this context, the movement affirms its readiness to...
And like they said before, we heard Jeremy Scahill say that the release of all prisoners is a remarkable offer.
Immediately enter through the mediators into negotiations to discuss the deal. The movement also reaffirms its approval to hand over the administration of the Gaza Strip to a Palestinian body of independents, technocrats, based on Palestinian national consensus and supported by Arab and Islamic backing. As for the other issues included in President Trump's proposal concerning the future of the Gaza Strip and the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people, this is tied to a collective national position and in accordance with relevant international laws and resolutions to be discussed within a comprehensive Palestinian national framework in which Hamas will be included and will contribute with full responsibility. So interestingly, Trump on Friday posted a statement in its entirety, which included a first paragraph, which I didn't read to you there, which described Israel's actions as a genocide. So that seemed to be the US president recognizing what was really going on. He did go on to delete that post. The important fact remained, though, Trump considered this response from Hamas as enough to justify a ceasefire. That was a point he reiterated in a message from the Oval Office.
So I just want to let you know that this is a very special day, maybe unprecedented in many ways. It is unprecedented, but thank you all. And thank you all to those great countries that helped. We were given a tremendous amount of help. Everybody was unified in wanting this war to end and seeing peace in the Middle East. And we're very close to achieving that. Thank you all, and everybody will be treated fairly.
Now, according to Axios, Netanyahu wasn't quite so convinced by Hamas's response to the 20-point plan. So this is from Axios. When Hamas came back with a yes, but...
I'm just fucking stun-locked. I'm taking psychic damage from Trump saying, fuck, I've already blocked it out of my mind. What are you saying?
That. Thank you all, and everybody will be treated fairly.
Yeah, everybody will be treated fairly. Look at that. His
now,
face.
according to Axios, Netanyahu wasn't quite so convinced by Hamas's response to the 20-point plan. So this is from Axios. When Hamas came back with a yes, but to President Trump's Gaza peace proposal on Friday, Trump called Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to discuss what he saw as good news. Netanyahu felt differently. Quote, Bibi told Trump this is nothing to celebrate and that it doesn't mean anything, unquote. A US official with knowledge of the call told Axios. Trump fired back, I don't know why you're always so effing negative. This is a win. Take it. Now, over the weekend, Donald Trump continued to very publicly pressure Netanyahu to accept a ceasefire. So on Truth Social, he posted images of the protests in Israel by hostage families who have been calling for months for a ceasefire deal. They're holding a giant banner there saying it's now or never. Unusually, and this is really interesting, Trump also posted an article from the New York Times, the failed New York Times, or New York Crimes. And the article he shared has the headline, How Fury Over Israel's Qatar Attack Pushed Netanyahu on Gaza.
Wow, dude. I mean, credit where credit is due. Biden never pushed Netanyahu this hard. But also, let's put that credit in a criticism sandwich here and say that Trump could have done this at any time. And he's only choosing to do it now because Gaza's completely destroyed now.
The Qatar attack in question was, of course, that on the 9th of September when Israel bombed the US
Yeah, peace in the graveyard.
In a failed bid to kill Hamas negotiators. And the New York Times report that the attack came as a surprise to American negotiators Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, who felt their attempts at mediation had been undermined. And the NYT write this. Some White House officials say saw the failed strike as an opportunity. Mr. Netanyahu had taken the shot thinking it could make his already weak enemies even weaker. But Israel had missed its targets, and the strike had the opposite effect, infuriating the United States and influential Arab governments. Perhaps, the White House officials thought, the moment could be exploited to get Mr. Netanyahu to budge on some negotiating points he had long opposed. And this is an article based on sort of sources close to the White House, but Donald Trump, by publicly tweeting that story, is presumably publicly endorsing it. And in the run-up to negotiations in Cairo, which is taking place today and tomorrow, he seemed confident a final deal would be reached.
We don't need flexibility because everybody's pretty much agreed to it, but there'll always be some changes. But the Hamas plan, I tell you, it's amazing. You're going to have peace, if you think about it, peace in the Middle East for the first time in, they say, really, 3,000 years.
So the Hamas plan, I tell you, it's amazing. Again, not usually words you'd expect to hear from an American president. To discuss Trump's so-called peace plan, I'm joined by Middle East analyst and former Israeli negotiator Daniel Levy. Welcome back to the show. We've had you on numerous times to discuss many a ceasefire proposal over the past 2 years. None of
Hamas has succeeded in their psyop of making Trump think that the peace plan was his idea. Oh God!
Come so much. Is this time?
What is my country, dude?
First time in 3,000 years that we've spoken with a modicum of. Sorry, this is serious issues. Okay, what is different here is that the country enabling, the party enabling genocidal assaults has put something on the table that it wants to hold both sides to, and with all the flaws and shortcomings, and they are monumental, certainly when it comes to any future arrangements. The question of this ceasefire, scaling up of humanitarian assistance, withdrawal of the IDF is in there, and now it all depends on the details. Because what the plan doesn't have is those details. What it would need to have is details that offer a credible pathway from a ceasefire, release hostages, release Palestinian prisoners being held by Israel, often in detention without trial.
Look, I see the ceasefire as nothing more than a loyalty test for Netanyahu, because we already know that Hamas is going to make good on their end of the bargain. It's really just up to the rogue, genocidal ethno-state to behave themselves for 1 fucking second, but we'll see. Alright, I think I'm gonna leave it there. Free Palestine, fuck Israel, crush Zionism forever. I'll see you guys around. Peace.
Where's your fucking badge, you pigs? We go hard for Palestine. We escalate for Palestine. We fight for Palestine. We give it everything we got. We do not work with the police. We do not point people out to the police. We do not lay hands on our comrades. When we go hard for our people, you stand out the way. If you ain't with it,